First up, though, let's talk about, well, a country that would like to be an independent republic, and that is Scotland. And the SNP-led Scottish Government confirmed yesterday they will launch a legal challenge against the bloc put on their plans for gender self-ID reforms. Rishi Sunak and his Scottish Secretary decided to block that change in the law on the basis that actually it was outside of the remit of the Scottish Government's powers, but also that it would basically come up against UK-wide equality laws in terms of the impact on women's and girls' rights and safety. Let's talk about this with Freda Wallace. She's a trans woman and works for the LGBT Foundation in Manchester and is host of the Gender Nebulous podcast. Good morning to you, Freda.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. These gender self-ID reforms, very controversial in Scotland, seen as being part of the reason why Nicola Sturgeon ended up leaving as First Minister, as one of the straws that broke the camel's back. Why do you think Humza Yousaf is confirming that he's going to launch a legal action to try and push this through?
I think it's controversial in Scotland because this was overwhelmingly voted for by a cross-party majority. And what you're seeing here realistically is the meddling of Westminster lobby groups in Scottish politics. This bit of legislation has never been so... there's never been a piece of legislation so heavily fought over. And you have to question why that is. You know, there's so many different factors to this. I don't think this is why Sturgeon left. I think there might be something else going on there.
You say it's not controversial in Scotland. It is. The vast majority... Well, polling has shown very clearly, well over two-thirds of Scottish people don't support this. Now, politicians might well support it in Parliament. Labour voted for this, the Greens, SNP, some other parties. But Lib Dems, lots of support in Parliament, but it hasn't got the support of the Scottish people, including an awful lot of SNP members.
Well, there might be some SNP members, like what's she called, Cherry? I forgot. Joanna Cherry. But they're very much linked to the lobby groups I just mentioned.
What lobby groups?
Well, we're talking about For Women Scotland. We're talking about the LGBT Alliance.
Groups representing women. How awful!
No, they represent Westminster, Julia. 7 independent Scottish women's groups support self-ID, and they wrote to the Scottish Parliament to express that. We cannot allow.
No, but can
Julia,
you address? No, Freda, address the question I actually asked you. You said it's not controversial in Scotland because people support it, because you pointed to politicians voting for it. I pointed out the Scottish people don't. The polling is very consistent. The Scottish people don't support this.
Well, it depends who's doing the polling, doesn't it, Julia?
It does.
It does. It really does. And tell you something.
There are no polls saying that the Scottish people support this.
Well, I'm just going to say, we can't allow the lives of trans people to be used as a pawn in a Westminster battle. We are, Julia. And you've platformed people on this programme like Kelly J. Keane, who are very much linked to far-right nationalist groups.
Freda, I know you get away with this on other shows, but you're not talking that nonsense on my show. That is actually a libel. She's not. I know Kelly J. Keane.
She is, absolutely.
I platformed her because she is a woman who's campaigned for women's safety.
Julia, stop lying. Please stop lying.
Freda, you're being rude to me and you're libelling a former guest on my show.
No, I'm not. It's
I know you
fact,
get away
Julia.
with this sort of bullying on other shows, but it doesn't fly with me.
When you have people like Lee Anderson suddenly supporting women's rights, you know there's something fishy going on in Westminster. Let's be realistic about this.
Again, another absurd statement. The key thing here is gender self-ID. Any man or woman being able to say that they are living in they are now a different gender and having that legally recognised. That doesn't expose men to risks, but it does expose women to risks. We know with men who are rapists. We've seen Isla Bryson and other cases who can then, after the point at which they're charged or convicted, say, "Oh, actually, I'm a woman," and get put into a women's prison. That was something that the Scottish gender self-ID law would allow. It's been happening in England as well. Some of the Humza Yousaf and indeed Nicola Sturgeon endorsed happening until there was a public outcry and they had to backtrack. At the end of the day, as much as I don't want trans people to have to go through any more difficulties in their lives than they already are going through, because I think it's a very difficult thing to be in that situation. When rights for trans people trample on the rights and safety of women and girls, we have a right to speak out, don't we?
Well, all you have to do there is do a risk assessment, Julian. 18 other countries that have self-ID laws with no issues, most recently Spain and Finland, they have these laws of self-ID. There's no issues at all.
There's no issue with men being rapists being put into prisons with women.
Well, that's not what we're discussing here, but don't go to extremes.
We're
not going to those extremes, Julia.
Those extremes, they were 3 in 1 week,
Okay, can I just speak to that a little bit? Because when you go to extremes, you don't win the argument. When you start talking about immigrants as having diseases, we know where that's going.
What happened then? Where did that get thrown in? Talk about the subject in hand, Freda.
Why don't you speak to Brendan O'Neill again and have a word with him, and he'll tell you.
Talk about the subject. I love the fact you're just deflecting to. I mean, why don't you just call everyone a Nazi in the next few minutes? We'll have done. I'll have the full. We'll have the full packet of insults.
Is that an admission
I asked you a question, and you're deliberately. No, Freda. Do you know what? I'm sure these things. Interviews like this do really well online because, people are battling. But yes, I think it's really boring. I'd much rather have a sensible conversation about where trans rights clash with women's rights.
You've had no sensible discussions on trans issues. And all I can tell you is young trans people that I know feel like they're being talked about a lot and we're not being represented properly. And if I can't have a conversation with you factually, then...
No, apparently you can't.
Well, I have done, and I've told you some facts. Now, follow Trans Safety Network, follow my Twitter, and you will understand where this is coming from.
Oh, I think I've got better things to do than follow you on Twitter, Freda. Again, we've wasted so much time. We could have had a useful conversation, but if you don't want to have a useful conversation, I guess we won't. But time is over for us, unfortunately. I'm sure we'll invite you on again, though. We'll see if we can get some more time and actually have a sensible conversation, if that's possible.